one of the things we used to try and do quite a bit was do some boating. And Steve Cass usually had a boat of some sort. And one year he had a catamaran, 28-foot racing catamaran. Now, the racing catamarans are really slimmed down. There's not much in them. And this was the case with this boat. It basically had an open cockpit. They had sort of windows on three sides, but there was no real storage underneath except in the hulls, which were hard to get to when you were underway. So it was just basically this pit that we would stack all our stuff in, which was fine. And so we jumped in the boat on a Friday after school, and we're headed for Catalina. We thought we'd go to Catalina for the weekend and go diving. So we had all our diving gear with us and stuff, and we took off, and it started off to be a very nice evening to sail over, but unbeknownst to us, small craft warnings came out about an hour into our sail. Now I say unbeknownst to us because we weren't bright enough to look at the weather report before we left, and we didn't have any radios on board, which was also pretty stupid, to either get information or to ask for help. So we were just out there on our own. We also didn't have any life vests, so it was kind of a dumb thing to do. So we're now sailing into small craft warnings, and we put on our wetsuits, which would keep us warm, but also would provide buoyancy if we ended up knocked overboard. And we dropped our big mainsail and put up what's called a working jib, which is a smaller sail that allows you control, but doesn't give you super speed. We were looking more for control, and we were doing fine. And then we noticed that we were getting a little lower in the water on the port side. So we looked at it, and sure enough, the hatch on the port side had broken loose, and we couldn't fix it. It was too far out on the hull, with the waves going up and down. There was no way. Plus, we didn't really have the tools to do it. But so we had to make a decision, and at that point, we realized we were likely closer to Catalina than we were to the mainland. So we just stayed in the direction we were headed, and just paid attention. Well, sure enough, we were getting lower and lower in the water, and there wasn't anything we could do about it. We couldn't call for help. So we just continued to sail. And then early in the morning, we finally got to Catalina. It was a long night. And we got into the lee of the island. We got close into the island. We were north of the Isthmus of Catalina. The Isthmus has a small little town in it, more like a little village. And when we got into the lee of the island, we lost the wind, and so we put the little outboard motor we had on and put it under power. Well, so that did a couple things. Losing the wind dropped slowed us down substantially. And then we put it under power, which dropped the stern a little bit more. And our wake caught up with us and came right in the cabin because we were so low in the water. And at this point, we capsized. So we're off the island, but we're still a ways out. We decided we were going to need some help. So I recovered one fin, and Steve was doing his best to try and grab other things and tie him to the boat and hold on to that stuff. And I decided I'd just swim ashore and get some help. So I took off. Although it was still quite a ways, had a wetsuit on, and I had one fin. I wasn't too worried. And so I was about halfway to shore and got caught in the bull kelp that's pretty much all around Catalina. And although it wasn't a hassle, other than it was just I got caught, couldn't make any progress towards the island. And just about then, a big cabin cruiser came out from the next bay, and so I whistled at him, and I could see him come out on the back of the cabin cruiser and look around back at the island, thinking somebody there had whistled. And as he turned to go back into the boat again, I whistled again, and he said he saw my arm. He heard me, he saw my arm. So he turned the boat and came over towards me, thinking there was a diver caught in the kelp. And he was, as he got closer, he spotted our boat that had capsized. So he knew this was a bigger deal. And he called a buddy of his he was working with there. And they had another boat, a Boston whaler. And the Boston whaler went over to the boat to see if they could help. And the first cabin cruiser picked me up. Well, it was an old friend. He had been my diving instructor. His name's Dick Pastor, and I used to go by Dick in those names. So it was kind of funny that he was the one that picks me up. Anyway, so he picks me up and takes me back to the isthmus, and at the same time, the little Boston whaler picked up Steve and brought him there too. Unfortunately, Steve had blown out all these sinuses trying to dive for stuff, and he'd gone into shock, and he was losing blood from his nose and sinuses and stuff. So he was a mess. But we still needed to do something about the boat. So Dick agreed to help us, and he borrowed the Boston whaler, and we were able to find a whole bunch of styrofoam on the island that they had saved up for because of the old Santa Barbara oil spill. They were afraid oil would get into the island areas, and so they had saved this up to use it as a boundary against the oil, but they didn't need to use it. So they had all the styrofoam, and they're more than willing to give us some. And we put it all in the Boston whaler, and we took it back out to the site. And in the meantime, Steve had been able to find a little bit more gear, some masks and some snorkels and regulator and stuff, but no more tanks. So no tanks at all. We didn't have a tank. So I put on the diving goggles and looked around, and I was able to spot a tank on the bottom. Water was really clear. It was about 45 feet, I think. And so I just free dove down and grabbed the tank and brought it back up. We put the regulator on, and that helped me find some more dive gear. One of the funny things is Steve was diving down looking for stuff, and I had just been paid on Friday and had a whole bunch of money in my wallet. And the money had come out of the wallet, but it was all sitting together down there, and Steve found it. So that was kind of nice because, that's a couple of weeks' worth of pay for me. So now we had the ability to move around a little bit. Dick Pasker couldn't really dive because his sinuses were all in a problem, but and Steve Katz, of course, was still a bit of a mess, and he wasn't going to dive. But Steve stayed in the Boston whaler, broke up the styrofoam into usable sizes, and then gave them to Dick, who was in the water, floating there. And I had tied a rope to the bottom of the boat and tied the other end to me. And so Dick would hand me a piece of styrofoam, and I'd tuck it under my arm and pull myself down to the submerged part of the boat and stuff the hull full of styrofoam as much as I could, and that helped to raise that side of the boat. And then I went and got a bunch of 55-gallon drums that they had, and we tied those to to the hull as well, and using air from the scuba tanks, I was able to displace the water, and the air filled up the 55-gallon drums, and that brought us pretty much to the surface again. But we were all tied up in the bull kelp. It had come in and floated in. So in the meantime, a big sloop, big party boat, big party sloop had come in, 100-foot or so, and they had a big power winch on board that they would use to raise their sails, their mainsail, because it was so big and heavy. And so they gave me a line, a rope from the winch, and that went up to the top of their main mast. And I tied this to the mast on top of the mast on the square root, and they just winched us up through the kelp. So they ripped all the kelp as it came up. But we were still pretty tied up, but at least we were pretty much upright at this point. And at that point, the big old cabin cruiser tied a line on us and pulled us out of the kelp and towed us over to the harbor there at the isthmus. And Steve and I then spent the rest of the day and part of the next day trying to fix the boat as much as we could. So we obviously pumped all the water out and, got the styrofoam out and fixed the hull and, made as much many repairs as we could to the boat. We couldn't fix the electrical system. It was the only main system we couldn't fix because it required parts, like a new battery and that kind of stuff that we didn't have. So, but everything else worked, so we decided on Sunday to sail home. We still had, go back to work on Monday. So I was going back to school. And so we sailed home that night. And the sail home on Sunday was, significantly different than the sail to Catalina. It was a beautiful, beautiful night. It was warm. Had a nice, pleasant breeze for sailing, and it was crystal clear. Lots of stars. And I remember as we were sailing home, I was lying on this net in the front of the boat, in the bow of the boat that stretched between the two holes of this catamaran. And I was lying there on my belly, just enjoying the ride. And three dolphins show up right underneath me, between the two holes, and they were actually guiding the ship, swimming along underneath and breaking the surface, right below me. And as they were breaking the surface, the water was a little fluorescent because of the algae in it, and they would break the surface, and it would fluoresce, and it was just beautiful. I mean, it was just really incredible. So the sail home was great. We got home okay. Everything was fine, but hopefully we learned a little bit out of that. Like, let's check the weather and at least take an emergency radio with us. So anyway, we got home safely, and actually I think that may have been the last time I was on the square root.